very warm greetings to all who have been here present for the motivational session, My Story. A very good morning to all present here. I, Srivatsa Perur, member IIC KLSGIT, will be the host for the day. Words are rose petals that are sprinkled with fragrance to invite one and all with warm greeting. Not merely words, a heartfelt feeling filled with emotions add flavor to welcome you. Now, I request Professor S.P. Deshpande, Dean Student Affairs, to welcome the gathering.
Very good morning to one and all here. It is my privilege to welcome this August gathering and the personality like Mr. Sudhir Kulkarni, who is General Manager Intel Corporation USA. On a short invitation, I welcome Shri Sudhir Kulkarni, who has accepted our invitation to be here to discuss or to motivate you people or to interact with you people. I welcome you, sir. I welcome all the dignitaries of the dais. There are many invitees who have assembled here to listen to sir, and all our deans, HODs, and student friends. All are welcome. And I'll not take much time. Okay, I hand over dais to the next. Thank you. Welcome one and all here.
Thank you so much, sir. I now request Dr. Manjula Ramanavar, Convener, IIC KLSGIT, to introduce the speaker of the day for the gathering.
An inspirational morning to one and all. Distinguished dignitaries, on and off the days, my learned colleagues, invitees, and my dear student friends. Those who belong to the clan of achievers live the idea that inspires them to dedicate their existence, efforts, and soul to its execution. We have amongst us an achiever in Shri Sudhir Kulkarni sir, who lives by this principle. I deem it my privilege and pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker to the gathering. Sir has completed BS Engineering from National Institute of Technology, Warangal, MS Engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, certificate course on Managing Teams for Innovation and Success from Harvard Business School, certificate course on Leading Product Development from Stanford University Graduate School of Business. Sir is a strategic thinker, big vision creator, and persuasive change agent leading to business results, and is a firm believer in data democratization and making data as true currency to boost GDP. Sir's ability to think beyond stated customer needs, to innovate and deliver beyond expectations, and delivering on ambitious product roadmaps while balancing near-term revenue goals are especially noteworthy. Sir has a rich experience of building, motivating, and managing high-performance global teams and specializes to quickly productize ideas by leveraging complementary teams and agile processes. Sir's major accomplishments include successes of Versant, Palm, Pubmatic going IPO, acquisition of Karmasphere, LiveVox, and data tools. Sir has devised and implemented data science and ML strategies for direct revenue impact at Loways, delivered data platforms at Loways and Oracle with focus on AI/ML. At Karmasphere, Sir recruited A+ team and delivered a big data analytics product in just a year's time. At LiveVox, he re-architected the platform, built solid engineering team to support exponential growth, and at Informatica, built team from 140 to 220 in a white-hot job market in just over a year. Sir has a rich work experience of 26 plus years spanning various geographies and capacities that include Vice President of Data and ML AI at Loways Companies Incorporation, United States, Vice President, Big Data and Analytics, Oracle, Redwood City, VP, Data and Analytics, Pubmatic, Redwood City, CTO and VP of Engineering, Karmasphere, Cupertino, CTO and VP of Engineering, CellPoints Incorporation, VP of Engineering, Livevox Incorporation, Managing Director, India Operations Informatica, Vice President of Engineering, Certif Incorporation, Director of Software Engineering, PalmSource, Software Engineering Manager, Data Tools Incorporation. In his current capacity as GM of Data and AI Platforms at Intel Corporation, United States, Sir is working on AI strategy for Intel, collaborating with large enterprise customers and CSPs to cater to their needs and leading the team that delivers AI Kit, a tool that is used to achieve end-to-end performance for AI workloads. Sir, we are indeed fortunate that we have a phenomenon in you as our distinguished speaker of the day. With this, I present before you Shri Sudhir Kulkarni. I request a round of applause for our esteemed speaker. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you so much for the introduction, ma'am. I now request Professor D.A. Kulkarni, Dean MBA KLSGIT, and Dr. Kiran Tangod, President IIC KLSGIT, to do the floral welcome to the dignitaries. Thank you, sirs. May I now request Mr. Vinay Kulkarni, Associate Member, Insurance Institutes of India, to give the introductory remarks.
गुड मॉर्निंग एवरीवन. जोश थोड़ा कम है. How is the Josh? A little once again. How is the Josh? That's nice. FIFA World Cup is just over. You all must have enjoyed the game. Those scissor kicks, cross kicks, bicycle kicks, the dodging of the ball, the great passes in the field, the penalty shootouts, etc. What this game is all about? A football, two teams, confrontation to get, gain, and retain the control over the football, strategize, pass, and score the goals to win the match, isn't it? But beyond just the sport, game, ecstasy, and entertainment, there lies some takeaway, I feel. When you watch next, see when and how one gets, gains, and retains the control over this football. Rather than running behind the ball, be there, reach out there where the ball would be next. And that's precisely the differentiating factor. These Pele, Maradona, Ronaldo, Neymar, Mbappe, Messi, we remember for this very reason. Friend Sudhir was our classmate since kindergarten till 4th standard in Government Marathi Primary School number 29. Yes, you heard it right. He did his primary and secondary school education in vernacular medium. His bio was just read out, and we know how knowledgeable, experienced, and resourceful he is. Knowing where the ball would be next, he charted and strategized his career path through grit and sheer hard work and ascended the ladder of success. We are meeting in person, in fact, almost after 50 years. Though we often interact through Facebook and WhatsApp, thanks to social media. When we learned about his scheduled visit to India and hometown Belgaum, I thought to make this visit worthwhile by arranging and organizing his talk to the more relevant audience and you students. GIT was the very first preference I thought where this talk should be delivered, since the institution has a hallmark of quality education in engineering with many more accolades to her credit. Thanks to Principal Sir, Team IIC, Team Student Affairs for instantaneously agreeing to and arranging this My Story session. And yes, Sudhir, दोस्ती के नाते ये session हमारा हक है. As you all are, I am equally eager to listen to Sudhir's story. Thank you one and all. I invite Sudhir, kindly come on stage. Thank you.
Slides? Yeah, I'm ready. No. Sorry. Which one next is this one, right? Previous, this one. Okay.
Red one is pointer.
What is this? Pointer.
Laser.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Here. Okay.
The length is big.
Sounds good. Good morning, everyone. Like Vinu said, Josh thoda kam hai. Good morning, everyone. That's better. So, thank you very much for this great opportunity to present my story. I will go through the agenda in a minute, but like they introduced me, my name is Sudhir Kulkarni. I'll go to the next slide. So, this is the agenda I'm going to cover today. Let me quickly preview the agenda to you. First, I'm going to discuss the goal of this talk itself. Secondly, I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. I think they've already discussed some of my background, but I'm going to give you some of the more intricate details. The third thing I'm going to talk about is about the American culture. I think many of you watch serials and televisions and movies, and you are familiar with some of the American culture, but I'll bring out some of the intricacies as well. Then I'm going to talk about this question, which I frequently get asked: should I go to America? And obviously, there are positives and negatives of going to America. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about how to manage your career in a downturn. So, because presently we are in downturn, and it's very critical to understand how to manage your career. So let me go to the next slide. So let's talk about the goal of this talk. Firstly, obviously, I want to share my professional journey of where I began in Kali Amrai in Belgaum and how I reached to where I am today. But most importantly, this talk is to inspire you, to motivate you, and also to share learnings and give you some advice so you can also manage your career. That's the goal of this talk. This is my background. I think some of the background was already covered, but I will point out some of the intricacies here. Like I mentioned before, I was born in Kali Amrai in Belgaum. That's a small lane behind the Khyber restaurant, if you recall. For primary school, I went to school number 29 in Belgaum, like Vinu already mentioned. For high school, I went to Ben and Smith High School. One of the things, like he mentioned, I actually went to school in Marathi medium, but I switched to English medium in Ben and Smith High School. And that was kind of a turning point for me. And we'll talk a little bit about communication and ability to communicate. But going to English medium was one of the best things my mother did for me. And that really spiraled my career. For 11th and 12th, I went to Willingdon College, Sangli, primarily because my uncle was head of the department there. And for BTech, I went to NIT Warangal. Now, here is an interesting story. So because I did 10th standard in Karnataka and 11th and 12th standard in Maharashtra, I was not eligible for admission. So I was only eligible for admission in NITs or IITs. So that, because of that complication, I actually landed up in NIT. So for MTech, I got an admission in IIT Chennai, and that was pretty much a no-brainer. I did my final year project in computer science, and that's how I kind of got into computer science. And then I went to Harvard as well as Stanford. But if you see sort of the education path here, I would highly advise you to kind of round up your education along with the engineering education, also obtain some management education, where they will teach you not only the management principles, but also some of the soft skills, which are absolutely critical for your career. Then let's talk about the work areas. I think some of these were already mentioned, but I primarily started in databases. So my primary skill is data storage, data retrieval, and high-speed computing. That's what I primarily do. And then I kind of transitioned. The natural transition was into data warehouses and big data. And obviously, in the last decade, I got into artificial intelligence and machine learning. So currently, I think this was mentioned as well. I'm the general manager at AI at Intel. I'm responsible for the AI strategy. I manage a large team, both in US as well as China. So this is the first job I don't have a team in India. I always had a team in India. Now I have teams in Europe, China, and US, but I unfortunately or fortunately don't have a team in India. So in other words, I don't have an excuse to come to India for the official reason. So I've also been, the other thing I would like to bring out is, I've been part of many startups as well, but I have been on all sides of startups. What does that mean? What it means is I've been a primary at a startup where I have sold a startup. I've been a part of a larger company where I have bought a startup, and I've been a part of a startup that has also gone out of business. So I have startup experience from all the three angles. I'll go on to the next slide here. Let's talk a little bit about the American culture. American culture is called as a melting pot. So what does a melting pot means? What it means is, as the years pass, you slowly, unknowingly start becoming quote-unquote American. You start losing sort of your Indianness, and you're the judge, right? So we had this discussion as well. But it's pretty interesting that every 10 years, supposedly, you start getting into the melting pot. So every 10 years, your culture kind of little bit gets aligned to the American culture. And just for the record, I've been there for 30 years now. Couple of things I like to bring out here. The first one is America is 3 times bigger than India. But the population is only 1/5. So population density is very, very low. I think this is a very, very important point. So if you leave out some of the big metros like New York, Los Angeles, and so on, the population density is very low. So there is low traffic, you get much better service, because every customer is important. You will not see long lines, you will find easy parking, and so on, simply because population density is very, very low. But there are about 5 million Indians, which is about 1.5% of the total population. American population is about 350 million to about 370 million. It's the second largest ethnic group. Any guesses on what's the first largest ethnic group in America? No. Chinese is a good guess, but it's actually Mexicans. Mexicans are very large in numbers. And they're Indians are second most economically successful group. So any guesses on who's the most successful ethnic group? One answer was Jews. It's actually Japanese. Japanese are most successful ethnic community in America. So about 60% immigrated after 2000, and it's kind of obvious. When I went to America, there were very, very few Indian people there. I went to America in 1992. Most people came actually for the Y2K problem. And there are a large number of people are obviously college educated, because the primary reason you go to America, they are college educated people, and their children also go to school. And 95% of the people don't return to India. This is probably something that you have seen from your friends and relatives. Most people decide to actually settle in America. So the Indian government currently gives a status which is called as OCI, I think colloquially people call everybody as NRIs, but there is no official status called NRIs. It's actually OCI, which is Overseas Citizen of Indians. So what Overseas Citizen of Indian means is that I have exactly same rights as you have, which is in terms of buying the property, starting a business, buying commercial property. The only thing I cannot do today is vote in the elections or contest an election. So besides that, I have all rights as an Indian citizen. So let's come back to some of the other aspects of it, right? So you will develop a different type of friend circle. You will develop a very diverse type of friend circle. There would be Americans, there would be black people, there would be maybe Mexicans, and maybe there is Koreans and Chinese, and so on. Today we see Indian movies in the mainstream theaters. So if you go to a theater complex, 50% of the movies would be actually Indian movies. That's very, very surprising. So I'm again showing my age, but I'm going to do that a lot during this presentation. But when I went to America, in the entire California, in the Northern California, there used to be one theater which would actually show Indian movies. And we had to wait in line for a long time to see one single Indian movie. Even the cricket matches, the World Cup, there was no way to watch World Cup. World Cup was not available on TV at that time. So we had to go to the same theater, and they will telecast the World Cup live in the theater. But they would divide the audience into two parts. On one side, there would be Pakistanis, other side would be the Indians. The other thing is about self-reliance, right? So one of the things that you have to get used to is to be very self-reliant. In America, you have to be self-reliant. You have to do your own dishes, you have to do your own laundry. There is nobody to actually cook for you or do your laundry or do your this one. So you got to get used to doing the chores as well as the laundry. Calling India is another thing. So today there is WhatsApp. The calls are free. When I went to America, it was pretty interesting. We had to go to the Indian store, buy a calling card, and then quickly make a call to our parents and say, hello, how are you doing? How is the mother? Okay, bye. That's how the calls used to be, because it was almost $2 a minute we had to pay. And that $2 30 years ago, which was far more valuable, right? The other thing you have to actually get used to is about the American accent. So I don't think this is a big issue right now, because I think you watch a lot of English movies, you watch a lot of English serials and so on. So I don't think this is a big issue at all. But I'll tell you one little story here. When I went to America, I went to DMV. DMV is the Department of Motor Vehicles. It's same as the RTO office here, right? So I went to the DMV, and I went and talked to this lady. And I said, I want my license, and what is the procedure? And then in between, she asked me, are you from India? And I said, how do you know? And she said, because you have an accent. And I said, I thought you have an accent. Because I was thinking she has an accent. She was thinking I had an accent, right? And then, of course, about the political polarization, which is, I feel it is similar to what you see here in India as well. If you are a Democrat or if you are a Republican, right? So even when we go for parties, we know exactly who is a Republican and we know exactly who is a Democrat. So even in some of the WhatsApp group now, there is sort of a rule that avoid political discussions, right? So even in America, there is a rule like that when you meet people for parties, you have to avoid all political discussions because it's so much of polarization there. But since we grow up in a democratic country, right, we are very close to politics. And Indians, because of that reason, are extremely active in American politics. So just on the same point, as you see here, I have put out some of the pictures. On the left, again, following the Indian-Pakistan, on the left are the democratic people, and on the right is the Republicans. So if you see some of the names there, Raja Krishnamurthy, Ami Bera, Ro Khanna is from California, Pramila Jayapal, and obviously everyone knows about Kamala Harris. And at the bottom is the Nikki Haley. She was the governor of beautiful state of South Carolina, and then an ambassador to United Nations from America. So what is now speculated, and which if it happens would be very interesting, is in the next presidential elections in 2024, it is speculated that Kamala Harris would be running on the Democratic ticket, and Nikki Haley might be running on the Republican ticket. So you can imagine, I mean, this is all about woman power, right? If two women of Indian origin would be battling for the most powerful nation in this world, I think that would be a feather in our cap. So with that, I will talk a little bit about professional culture. So America is always called as land of opportunity. Is it really land of opportunity? If you ask me that question, I would say yes. It is absolutely a land of opportunity. So the first thing I noticed the difference is a work-life balance, right? So what is meant by work-life balance? So you can actually walk into your manager's office, or you can just send him an email saying, hey, I have an errand. I got to take the afternoon off. Or you just have to send him an email saying, him or her, an email saying, hey, next week I'm taking time off. You're not expected to say, where are you going? What are you doing? You don't have to say, my grandfather's sister died. None of that, right? So everybody appreciates the work-life balance. People need to take their time off, and people are encouraged to take their time off. Like, for example, my current company, Intel, has a very generous vacation policy. We have 4 weeks of vacation, and we have a sabbatical. Every 4 years, you get another 4 weeks of sabbatical. So you get 8 weeks at the end of every 4 years you complete. So very generous policies are there. And the relationship with colleagues. So your relationship with colleagues is usually very different than what you see here in India, right? It's much more professional. And you will definitely pick up some friends at work, but the kind of atmosphere that you see here in India in cafeterias, you will not see that in the US. There'll be meetings going on in cafeteria, and you try to leverage your lunch hour to have a useful business conversation. The next one is about recognition. So I think this is one of the major points which I find as sort of a difference in the professional environment and in India as well as the US. In the US, they will actually recognize you for the smallest contribution that you go above and beyond. So they'll either pat your back, and there are multiple ways they motivate people. There is like a dinner on the town, where there'll be a small check where you can take your wife out on the dinner on the town, or multiple other different things where you'll be recognized in public meetings and so on. It's also a very result-oriented culture. What is a result-oriented culture? So what is meant by result-oriented culture is that if your manager says that this project needs to be done, and you say that, for example, you say it can be completed on, say, February 16th, the manager will give you enough elbow room. He will give you enough leeway to design the way you want it, but deliver the way you want it, but he will hold your feet to fire on that February 16th date. So February 16th actually means February 16th. It does not mean 17th, right? So I think they're very, very particular about that. So I'll give you one incident. So in the first company in America I worked, there was like a weekend gathering. We were all supposed to actually gather at 9 o'clock and drive in cars together to play a paintball game. I don't know if you're familiar with what paintball is. So we were actually going to go play a paintball game. I got ready, and it's like a weekend thing, right? So I arrived at 9:15, and there was nobody. And I truly thought I am the first one. I thought I am the first one. So I called some of my colleagues, and I said, hey guys, where are you? I said, we are on the way. We left at 9. So even on a weekend, adhering to the schedule is extremely, extremely important, right? We already talked about elbow room and delegation and talked about schedule commitment. Let's talk a little bit about the lighter side of professional environment, which is Diwali at work. So most companies now celebrate Diwali at work. Also, you have seen pictures of Diwali in the White House. New York State has now declared Diwali as a holiday, which I think is a great accomplishment, right? For all schools, it will be a school holiday. But they also actually celebrate Chinese New Year. For every ethnicity, there'll be some kind of a function or some kind of a gathering. So, you have to, because they come to our meetings, it's very important for us to go to kind of their meetings as well. And you will hear a lot of foreign languages. So one way to actually resonate with people is to learn some of the foreign languages. Learning languages is actually my passion. I've learned a lot of languages in my life. So even if you know basic greetings, so there are Russian people, so if you can say Здравствуйте, господа, or if you can say Hola amigo, Hola amiga, Hola señorita. So even a small thing, that resonates and makes that connection. So try to learn a foreign language. Take a German class, take a French class, because some of these languages are interdependent. If you learn French, it's easier to learn German. So I highly encourage you to learn a foreign language. And you will, of course, find many, many, many Indian people at work. In software companies, there are a large number of Indian people at work. But they're not Indian people from your city or town, but they'll be from all over India. So again, connecting with them, speaking their language is actually very, very important. So fortunately, we are from Belgaum, so we at least know Marathi and Kannada. So it's easier to pick up Telugu, right? So I picked up Telugu, I picked up Tamil, I know a little bit in Malayalam as well. So I was fortunate to learn all the 4 South Indian languages. And that really helps. You know, connecting people in their own language really helps, and it resonates. Multiple office cafeterias will feature Indian menu. And in companies such as Oracle, there is a separate Indian restaurant itself that serves multiple Indian dishes on an everyday basis. So you will not miss Indian food, especially if you're in California or New York. And here are some of the CEOs of the Indian origin. I think all of us know about Sundar Pichai as well as Satya Nadella, but there is Santanu Narayanan, Ajay Pal Singh Banga, Nikesh Arora, Sandeep Marthani, Arvind Krishna from IBM, and Rajiv Suri from Nokia, of course. I will go to the next slide. Here is a quote, and this quote is not exactly correct English because this was more conversational. So what Joe Biden said was, it's amazing, Indian of descent, Americans are taking over the country. You, my vice president, which is of course Kamala Harris, my speechwriter Vinay, you guys are incredible. So there is definitely this positive vibe about Indian people and their contribution. With that, we come to this important question, right? Should I go to America? So a lot of people when I travel to India ask me this question. Should I actually go to America? So obviously there are some advantages and there are some limitations, right? So the first advantage, or these could be some of the reasons why some people actually seek to go to America. So the first one is to explore the world and broaden your outlook, right? I think this is a difference that you starkly see. So when I was in India, when NRIs actually traveled or gave a presentation, I thought that was the biggest difference that I saw, right? Because they had wider exposure, their style of speaking was different, the communication was different. And this is why I actually went to America, to explore the world and to travel. The second reason could be higher education. Obviously, America offers the best possible education. I'm sure multiple of your cousins, brothers, sisters are already in America, right? Studying or doing jobs. So definitely this is one of the reasons. Are there better professional opportunities? Yes. So I'm pretty sure that there are better professional opportunities. But the gap, to tell you honestly, has reduced significantly right now. When I went to America, the opportunities that were available in India and opportunities were available in America were vastly different. In early 90s, there were public sectors like HAL, BHEL, and so on, and some of the other they were like computer companies I can literally count on palm of my hand. There were the big companies like Wipro, Infosys, HCL, and then there were some small companies. There is definitely higher earning potential. You will have more disposable income. That's for sure. Easier life and lower stress, I think this can probably be debated. I think we have multiple people who have returned from the US, and they can also probably comment. But I do feel that the life is slightly easier and there is much lower stress because you are working towards a commitment. You are not spending too much time in managing expectations, whereas you are only delivering on your commitments. And there is a whole new startup ecosystem. So even in India, there is now a well-formed startup ecosystem, right? And you in the college now have the Innovation Center. There is startup accelerators that are available. I have multiple friends who are VCs themselves in Bangalore. But I would say the startup ecosystem is more mature in America, and raising money is actually slightly easier in America. But I'll tell you my personal experience with the startup. So first time when I went to America, I actually took a job with a company called Versant Object Technology. And that was a database company. Like I said, database was my forte. So at that time, I was only interested in getting my green card, right? Because I was on an H-1 visa. My goal in life was to get a green card. So as my manager was discussing the opportunities, he tried to explain to me, he said, we are in a startup, we're going to go in an IPO in 1 year. And I said, okay, that's fine. When are you going to do my green card? And they said, we can start your green card immediately. I said, okay, that's what I want. And this is the compensation. Oh, okay, that's fine. No problem. I will take whatever money you give me right now. And I did go through the green card process with this company. But then I learned a lot about the startup ecosystem. And this company did go through an IPO. So that was an amazing experience. So that was my second job in America. I luckily went through an IPO, which was an absolutely amazing experience. And then, the Western civilization, so this is in the long-term view, right? So if you take a long-term view, and this is something that no one discussed with me, guys. I'll be very, very frank and open with you, right? So in early 90s, no one discussed with me sort of the long-term view when I turn 50, right? When my children go out of my house, and now when I'm alone with my wife, how is my life going to be? Nobody discussed this. So it is definitely worth thinking about this. So now imagine a situation, and guys, believe me, when I was your age, I thought I'm never going to get old. And believe me, it happens to you faster than you think. It happens to you much faster than you think. So you have to really think and ask yourself, do I really like Western civilization? Because if you do not like Western civilization, even a little bit, you are going to be unhappy. I'll be very frank and honest and blunt with you. You're going to be unhappy in America when you reach age of 50 and 50 plus, especially when your children leave your house. Because many people I have seen, they have kind of tried to build an India around them in America. So they kind of live geographically in US, but they go to Indian restaurants, they go to Indian music, they go to Indian dance, they have kind of built, their only friend circle is only Indian. And they slowly start becoming bitter. Because they feel like they are on an island. They are not part of the mainstream population. So you have to ask yourself, who is the right person to answer this question? It's you. So you have to ask yourself. Let's talk about some of the limitations. The first one is the missed opportunities in India. So like I pointed out before, today there are large number of opportunities in India as well. Almost every large company that is in the US is in India. And mostly it's in Karnataka, right? It's either in Bangalore or in Hyderabad or in Noida. So you have to really ask yourself. So if you look at kind of my career, I did try to take advantage of that. And I did come to India for a couple of years, taking the position of a managing director in Informatica. And it's a wonderful experience for me. But then I went back for the children's education purpose. But there is that other option as well, which is you can decide to spend, say, 10 years or 15 years, then you can come back to India in a really good position. That's the other option that you have in the back of your pocket. The next one is, the reduced family involvement. So over the years, what happens is your involvement kind of becomes lower and lower. You start becoming in the outer concentric circles of your family. Why is that? Because see, you're not there for every birthday. You're not there for every engagement. You're not there for every cousin's marriage. So you start kind of losing those connections over a period of time. And, after 20 years or 30 years, only few of those family connections will be left. And then loneliness is another thing. Like I said, right, when you're 50, if you have not built some of the hobbies, or if you're not kind of melted in the local population and absorbed some of the Western civilization, you're definitely going to feel lonely. You're going to be feeling that you kind of left on an island. So this is another one that I always advise people, right, which is be bold. Take risks. If you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something that you've never done. And this is very, very, very important. I can give you a couple of examples from my career. So when I was actually at a company called Data Tools, which got acquired by BMC Software, and that will come up again in a couple of other examples. I was an IC, which is an individual contributor. I was delivering a project. I went to SAP in Germany. I again gave them a presentation about my project. And they said, this project can be divided into 4 parts. And we want these to be delivered as 4 different projects. So I came back and I discussed with my boss, and I said, this is what SAP wants. They want us to deliver 4 different projects. So boss said, okay, I'll promote you to the manager. You deliver all the 4 projects because you know everything about this. So that was a really crucial decision that I had to make. Should I take this risk? Because I knew I can deliver 1 project for sure. It was completely under my preview, and I knew everything about it. Should I take a risk of delivering 4 projects, build a team, and deliver the projects on time? That was the risk that I took, which worked out very well for me. This is another career management strategy that I would like to discuss. This is called a small fish in a big pond and big fish in a small pond. So let's discuss what is the goal here, right? What is the goal? The goal is to become big fish in a big pond, correct? That's the goal. So how do you achieve becoming a big fish in a big pond? So typically what you can do is you can establish yourself in a large company, and once you reach, say, let's say senior engineer or a principal engineer, then a small company might be willing to hire you as a manager position. And then after a few years, you can make a horizontal transition to a senior manager in a larger company. And that's how you can actually climb the ladder faster. So I have exactly followed this strategy. And like I said, in BMC Software, which was a larger company, Data Tools was a smaller company. So in Data Tools, I became the manager, and the company took over, so I became a manager in BMC Software. Then I went to a smaller company called Prompt2. I went in there as a senior director. And after senior director, another small company hired me as a vice president. So I became vice president from 1992, I went to America, and I became vice president in 1999. So in 7 years, from senior engineer, I became vice president. So that's one way to manage your career. I'll probably not go through all these bullets, but I'll call out some of the highlights here. The main important thing here is you need to promote yourself. Because I'll tell you very, very honestly and very, very bluntly, right? See, in India, what they teach us is be humble, correct? Be respectful. And if you look at the American education system, they teach one particular topic from 1st grade to 12th grade. Do you know what they stress upon? Sorry, what is that? No, communication. They focus on communication. Students constantly present class projects, written papers. So you need to understand that you are now competing against a person who's trained in communication far longer than you've been trained. Correct? So you need to focus on improving your communication and promoting yourself. You have to understand that the job description is just the beginning. You know, I talked about appreciation and how you would get appreciated for going above and beyond. So going beyond your job description, doing more than what is asked of you is extremely, extremely important. Also remember that your job is temporary. I've already made this point, right? So when you do the small fish in a big pond and big fish in a small pond, your job is temporary. Because always, always remember, the company does not need you. I always, always say to people, never ever forget that after Steve Jobs died, Apple went to newer and newer heights. You're going to need a lot of skills. So this is very, very important, right? So currently you're trained in certain specific areas, but when you actually go into an industrial environment, you're going to need a lot more skills. And I think some of you have done the training, so you are probably aware, you have gone to the companies, but whether it is CI/CD, whether it is deployment, whether it's debugging, you're going to need a lot more skills than you actually learn in the college. And your personal life, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, is now public. What does this mean? So before every company that is going to hire you, they are going to hire a third-party company to investigate your social media postings. So be very, very careful on what you post on social media. because somebody is going to go through every aspect of it and judge your inclinations. Another important point is, your boss's career comes first. What does this mean? What this means is, there is no situation wherein your boss is going to lose and you're going to somehow win. It just doesn't exist. You have to always work on your making sure that he or she looks good. That's the only way to actually advance your career. And the last point, obviously, which is your career is in your hands. I think I have stressed this enough. I will go on to the next slide. Right now, I'm under weather a little bit with all the traveling, but I think it's extremely important that health is wealth. I have shared some of this with many of you here, but I truly believe this. Health is absolutely wealth. All of you are in this seat today because obviously you are very ambitious and you're very, very motivated. But along with that, you also need very, very good health because the life is stressful. When you decide to venture out, the life is very stressful. Although I say it's a lower stress, it's still physically and mentally stressful. So you need to focus on your health as well. This is a very, very important point I like to make here, right? Which is success is not a destination. It's a journey. It's a continuous improvement cycle. You actually never reach the success point. You travel through it. And at the bottom is kind of my corollary, right? Which is, regardless of setback, make it fun. I always coach my managers by saying, guys, every day morning, we get up in the morning, we take a shower, we eat our breakfast, and we are in our best mood. What do? We go to work. You get tired, you are hungry, then you come and you're all irritated. There's so many politics that is going on at work. You spend 8, 10, 12 hours, and what do? You go back to your family and friends. So why don't we make it fun for ourselves? So make it fun. Oh, this is just one slide, which this man forced me to put here. So of course, I'm very proud of being son of Belgaum, as you have probably seen. But he wanted me to actually speak about some of my hobbies and so on. So some of my hobbies are actually traveling, photography, boating, and I also spend some time doing yoga as well. So I want to show you a couple of sort of snippets of this. This is kind of me on my boat. I think I've taken some of you on the boat rides here. Boating is a great fun sport in America. This is actually my house in Florida with a swimming pool. And this is my other hobby. This is kind of combining my water hobby along with yoga. So I'm attempting to do underwater yoga here. And these are some of the examples of my photography. I'll quickly go through this on the lighter side of things. This is in Miami, Florida. This one is in Mahabaleshwar, India. This is in Dubrovnik in Croatia. This is a picture from California Beach. This is somewhere in flight. This is in Goa, India. Then this is on the Galapagos Islands. So these are some of the pictures that I have taken. And then we will come back to some of the other topics, such as how to manage career in the downtown. So as you're familiar, currently we are actually in a downturn. And to tell you the truth, most companies, most successful companies have got launched during the downturn. Because I firmly believe that problems are challenges. When you have a problem, never look at it as a problem. Look at it as a challenge and take that challenge. And economic cycles, for various reasons, are actually more pronounced in America than in India. And they're more pronounced because America believes in scale, huge scale. So if there is a need to hire 20 engineers, in America we will hire 40. So when it's time to come fire 5 people, we have to unfortunately fire 25 people because we overhired. If they want to buy 20 servers, they'll buy 50 servers. So there is always this, they go for the big one. They always go for the big one. They go for the scale. And it largely works out. But when the downturn hits, like they say, right, if sun sets, it sets for everybody. It doesn't set for one or two companies. But when you are in a downturn, I highly encourage you to invest in your future and continued learning. There are multiple free courses such as Khan Academy, Allison, Course Buffet, Code Academy, and Free Code Camp. And of course, with very little money, you can buy courses at Coursera and Udacity. There is LinkedIn Learning and podcasts. So podcasts are actually my very, very favorite. I do a large portion of my learning on the podcast when I'm driving, when I'm doing chores. I just have the podcasts going. That brings me up to speed on the latest industry trends, as well as I learn new technologies. And then the most important thing is show resilience and continued commitment to innovation. I think this is extremely important in downturn, right? If your manager comes up to you and says, hey, can you fix this JavaScript? Never turn back and answer, oh, I don't know JavaScript. I'm just a Python guy. Never ever say that. Just say that I'm not fully familiar with JavaScript. I might need 2 days to do this. And spend 2 days in coming up to speed to that, right? Keep tabs on the industry trends and innovation. I think I already talked about this. Listen to podcasts, listen to multiple ways of communication. And of course, there are things like ChatGPT. How many people are familiar with ChatGPT? There are a few hands. I encourage every one of you to Google what is ChatGPT. It's an amazing new technology. It's I think the most cutting edge artificial intelligence, and it's absolutely unbelievable. It almost sounds like magic. And maintain a strong sense of optimism and radiate hope. Never ever say that I'm finished, this is the end of road for me. You see a lot of people complaining in such tone in India, but always project optimism and positivity. And I talked a little bit about soft skills and emotional intelligence, but focus on soft skills. Focus on communication. Always read English newspapers, English news, and English channels, because communication is extremely important. I also talked about focus, but I like to talk a little bit about hedgehog. So Mike Collins has written a great book called Good to Great. I highly encourage you to read that book called Good to Great. In that, he explains a concept called a hedgehog concept. I think you know what hedgehog is, right? So a fox is always trying to catch the hedgehog. And fox tries multiple tricks to catch the hedgehog. The fox plays dead, fox runs fast, he tries to jump off the tree. But hedgehog knows only one skill. He curls up. So every time fox attacks, he curls up. So he just keeps the focus, whereas fox fails in catching him. There is a lot of morale in this story. I highly encourage you to read that book. With this, I like to turn to questions and answers, if there are any questions. I think if you remember, I talked about being overly humble and being shy, right? So this is your first step, I think.
Hello, sir. Could you enlighten a little more about your role on AI products or related to ML something?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I think that's a great question, because I think everybody thinks of Intel as a hardware company, right? Intel actually creates all these chips in every one of your laptops. But Intel has the other arm, which is a software arm as well. At Intel, we actually build an AI and ML platform, which has two functions. It has some of the ready-made recipes to put some of the business cases in production. So let's say you want to put a chatbot into production. So we actually give you an entire recipe, which we call as a workflow. So you can take that workflow and put that into production. Obviously, we have pre-trained the chatbot, so you can apply some of the transfer learning concepts. Same thing with the image recognition. So currently we release about 14 toolkits, which are pre-trained models that you can directly leverage. So that's kind of on the top layer. On the bottom layer, there are Intel libraries which are optimized for the Intel processors. So there is Intel Python, Intel Scikit-learn, Intel PyTorch, and Intel Modern, which give you, so Intel Python actually gives you acceleration to about 200 times, not 200%, but 200 times. Intel Modern gives you an optimization about 100 times. So it comes in basically two aspects. At the bottom layer, it's optimizations, and on the top layer, there are recipes.
Sir, how do you compare opportunities? You spoke about opportunities in USA. How do you compare opportunities compared to USA in Germany and Canada? Because nowadays we are listening, many people along with USA, they are going to Canada or somewhere in Germany. So how do you weigh those opportunities?
So I have very little knowledge about Germany, but I can speak to Canada. I have little knowledge about Germany. So the Canadian market is very similar to the US market, right? Canada is sometimes called as a hat of America. So Canadian market is very similar, and the immigration process is much easier in Canada than the US right now. So it's much easier to go to Canada, the way the immigration works. And the most important difference between Canada and Germany is the language barrier, right? So if you want to go to Germany, I don't think you can get away by not learning German. You have to learn German. No matter what they tell you, you have to learn German. But again, I don't think German is a very difficult language, guys. If you know English, German is not. It's a Germanic language, right? English is a Germanic language. So there are many common words. The sentence construction is slightly different, but you can learn German in 6 months. With little knowledge, so people that have gone to Germany, to your point, sir, is that, people have gone to Germany with little knowledge, but they had to learn German. Because I made several trips to Germany. I've made more than 20 trips to Germany. I've traveled around the Germany. But you have to know German, basically. I'd like to get some questions from students.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, I wanted to know which all fields have a demand in USA in computers.
You said which all PEs?
Fields.
Fields, okay, thank you.
Have
Thank
a
you.
demand in USA regarding computers.
Yeah, so let me think about this. So off the top of my head, obviously I talked about AI ML, right? So artificial intelligence and machine learning is the topmost opportunity right now. I think we are at a much shortage of data scientists. The next one in my mind are actually data engineers. So your ability to actually gather data, massage data, we sometimes call it wrangle data. So data wrangling is extremely important. So if you have database skills or script skills, they're actually extremely important. So after that, I would consider UI and UX, and the design skills are extremely important. You see a lot of these startups now, such as, for example, Airbnb, started by UI folks, not by computer scientists. So I think UI UX is also very important. The QA skill is fast deteriorating because the whole concept of QA in the agile is going away, right?
Yeah, since you mentioned about UI and UX, please elaborate.
So if you look at the difference between, say, for example, an Apple system, right? Either a Mac or an iPhone versus Windows computers or Android phones, right? Apple is always behind in technology, right? So Apple has the slowest processors, Apple has the lowest operating system levels, but Apple focuses on user experience. Out of the box user experience is extremely important in terms of adoption, right? So Apple follows these specific strategies. No feature is more than 3 clicks away. So the learning is less, right? There is no user manual for Apple products. You just discover yourself. So intuitive UI and leads to democratization, right? What does that mean? So if I build an intuitive UI, it will be adopted to the bottom of the pyramid, to a larger number of population. And if I make, so for example, right, I mean, it's very simple. If Sony would make a television and say that you need to understand exactly how a television works to watch the television, I think Sony will sell 1,000 sets or something, right? But Sony didn't do that. Sony said, hey, all you need to know is to how to operate the remote, not the television.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You talked about soft skills, but I want to know more about emotional intelligence because everybody is speaking about soft skills, but in the downturn, how do we come with emotional intelligence?
No, I think that is an excellent question, actually. So I think emotional intelligence is very important. What this means is it goes back to number of management strategies. But emotional intelligence starts with basic things such as reading a room, body language, right? Understanding each other. So when you go to America, see, we have some body language which does not actually bode well in America, right? Which is usually, like I said, they train us to become humble. So we usually bow down and speak to our elders, right? Americans expect you to look into the eyes, right? You have to watch their finger movements, see if people are engaged, watch the body language, get the non-visual clues on how your presentation is going. I think those are the basics. But in terms of management philosophies, there are two basic management philosophies. The first one is cheering from the back, which is if you are dealing with a type A team, you usually cheer them from the back. And if you're dealing with a type B team, which is a shy type of team, you are actually leading them from the front. But emotional intelligence suggests to actually combine these two strategies, depending on who you are managing. I hope I have answered your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please highlight the issues of the latest geopolitical situations and the behavior of some of the MANG companies?
Highlight can you restate?
The connection between the geopolitical situations right now, the recession and the major layoffs, and that of the behavior of the MANG companies, the big data companies, like Google, Microsoft and all.
Yeah, so I'm not a geopolitical expert actually. But most economics say that a recession is imminent because of the ongoing war and the inflation that's actually happening. So I think by leveraging some of the strategies that I have outlined in managing the career, I think you have to basically travel the bumpy road that's ahead of us.
Good afternoon, sir. I want to know about the scope of cybersecurity in US. Like the revolution started 10 years ago from now. So is it neutralized or the scope is still yet and it will be there in next 10 years?
Oh, yes, this is a very good point. I'm sorry, I actually forgot to mention cybersecurity in the list that I rolled out because that's exactly not my field. But I think cybersecurity is right up there with AI and data engineering. Cybersecurity continues to be extremely important, right? Because basically the hackers and the security folks, they play this spy versus spy, right? So every time there is a new technology, they try to find a way to hack it. So cybersecurity will continue to remain highest priority for multiple corporations. Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, as we, sir, like we are transitioning from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. So what's your take on blockchain in the new decade, sir? I just want to know how is the things going in US for the blockchain developers?
Yeah, so, if you separate cryptocurrency from blockchain, so I think blockchain definitely has certain advantages. But the hype has kind of slowed down because of the crypto crash. But the scientific applications and engineering applications of blockchain still remain. So if you talk about Web 3.0, I know multiple companies today are funded on Web 3.0. Multiple companies. One of my really good friends called Kritika Reddy, that's another success story. You should actually Google her name and look at her success story. Kritika Reddy came to America as a wife of a student and she actually started attending courses with her husband because she was bored at home. As she attended courses, this is a really interesting story, and I feel compelled to tell you this story. As she started attending courses, she started getting better grades than her husband. And in the next year, her husband started reading her notes and started passing the exams. And then both of them, this was in Buffalo, in New York. And then eventually they moved to California and became very good friends with us. They were actually friends of friends before, when they were in Buffalo, because I had a very good friend in Buffalo and I used to travel to Buffalo very often. So they actually came, and then she started working somewhere and he started working somewhere as well, and his career was going really well. But then she was really bored, so she decided to take an MBA entrance test. I talked about the management education, right? So she decided to take an MBA entrance test, and she got 800 out of 800. Straight A's. And then she got an admission into Stanford MBA. So she passed Stanford MBA with flying colors, and she actually had a first job, I think, somewhere. But her second job, guess what her second job was? She actually came to India as a MD Facebook to open the Facebook office. So she stayed in India, I think, for about 8 or 9 years. And now she's a VC. She actually gives money to other people. You should really Google her name and look at her story as well. Her name is Kirtiga Reddy. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So my doubt was like, what if I decide to stay in India? How much my opportunities will be limited, and what do you think will be the scenario by 2030 about the opportunities comparing India and America?
So let me divide those into two parts, right? So I really think there are plenty of opportunities in India. There are a huge number of opportunities in India. Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Noida. So I don't think there is a dearth of opportunities. But I would like to say that I think there is more competition in India than the US, frankly speaking, right? By 2030, I truly believe that the competition will actually increase. Going back to the other question that was asked about the geopolitical situation and what's happening in China, I truly believe that India will get more share of the global market, primarily because now there is focus on moving away from China as well. So if there is a focus on moving away from China, you've already seen some of the semiconductor focus, you've seen many software firms now coming from China, and I think that's only going to increase. Given the democratic background, English-speaking country, I think India is going to get much more opportunities with all the infrastructure changes that's happening, more than China.
Sir, I had one more question. This is like geopolitical based little bit. What if, unfortunately, China takes over Taiwan? How will it affect America and the chip producing company? Sorry, the like Intel and all, which uses chips and microprocessors.
No, so Intel, so that I think is a good question. So I'll try to avoid the controversy and try to answer that question, right? So frankly speaking, see, Intel is only semiconductor company that manufactures their own semiconductors. No one else manufactures their own semiconductors, right? So Intel has its own fabs. NVIDIA does not have their fabs. So our biggest competitors are NVIDIA and AMD. AMD and NVIDIA do not have their fabs. They're fabless companies, whereas we have our own fabs all over the US. So Intel is primarily not affected if we decide not to do business with China, just like we have decided business with, we have ceased business with Russia. And I have to tell you an interesting story about that. So I had a 60 people team in Russia, and overnight, Intel decided to suspend operations. So all my project timelines went out of the window because we could not even talk to them. We were actually stopped from even talking to them or exchanging emails with 60 people. So you can imagine, there were huge commitments that were made, and they ceased operations. So eventually, I was able to move about 40 people to Europe in Germany, but 20 people are quote-unquote patriots, so they decided to stay in Russia. So now I have a 40 people team. I lost 20 people, but in the last 4 months, there's literally zero work that is delivered by 60 people. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
So, since this is about your story, I would like you to reflect on a point where you were in America and wished that you would be in India, and another place in your story where you were in India and wished you would be in America.
So, I already touched upon this, right? Which is when you're in America, there are all these small things, right? You always miss. You miss most of the weddings of your cousins. I mean, why do we go to weddings? I mean, we go to wedding not to attend the wedding, but to meet everybody else, right? So that whole gathering thing, you actually lose. You actually lose. And if you actually talk to, this is a very funny thing that one of my Indian friend pointed out, that NRIs who have gone out of India for last 30 years or 40 years, they still think of India that it's last 30 years or 40 years, but India has advanced significantly, right? So that's when I feel that I should have been kind of in India, or at least they would design faster airplanes so I can quickly come here over the weekend. But like I mentioned before, the distances are vast, they're huge. And it takes a lot of planning to make one India trip, unfortunately or fortunately, especially because I don't have an India team right now.
Pardon me, sir, even I am asking a geopolitical question. My question is, how much democracy a company in the US has in making its own decision in its products and services worldwide? Like we have seen Russia out of the SWIFT system, and we have seen the semiconductor blockage to China. I want to know that, is it the company making it, or is the political party in US or the US government making that happen?
Well, so those are the decisions made by the US government. So if you are actually talking about the current blockade that has happened in high performance computing to China, that's a decision made by the US government. We would love to sell our chips to China. So would NVIDIA. NVIDIA's chip sales are completely blocked right now because America calls it quote unquote strategic interest. So it's in the conflict of strategic interest of America to sell high performance equipment to China because they're afraid it will be used against them. So those are not the decisions made by the company. They are all made by the American government. And in America, like I said, right, following laws is not optional. You have to follow the rules.
Yeah, this is on behalf of all the young engineers in India. You just mentioned we don't have a team in India. So this is a sort of strategic question. Is Intel going to provide any opportunities to the young engineers in India in recent future?
Hey, that's a good question. But, I like to point out that you're not an engineer, you're a doctor. Hey, let me answer his question, okay? So to answer your question, actually, Intel has a large presence in India, very large presence in India, in Bangalore as well as in Noida. I personally don't have a team in India right now. But Intel has a very large presence in India. Please.
Hello, sir. This is a technical question. A lot of people are after learning and teaching in AI, machine learning. This is a technical question. So I see the moment people start learning AI, machine learning, they are only after models, algorithms, and technical things. But I feel a lot of emphasis on database creation, the sanity of data, the knowledge on that is largely missing. So since you are a database expert, I would want you to throw some light on the importance of the data itself that acts as a fuel to further things.
I think that's an excellent point. So when I think about the AI and ML life cycle in total, I tend to divide that between three parts, right? The first part is what you just mentioned, which is the data management. The second part is the model management. And the third part is actually the deployment, tracking, drift measuring, and so on, right? So typically a data scientist focuses on the middle part. So that is called as a model-first approach. So typically data scientists take the model-first approach. They work on the model, they are satisfied with the model, and they declare victory. Only when you deploy that model into production and it starts seeing real data, it stumbles. The accuracy goes significantly down, and they're back to square one. And if you look at the research today, large number of AI projects are actually cancelled because the moment the model is put into production, then they have to go back to square one because they did not consider the real data. And that's when they start the data preparation. So I feel that the data prep cycle, which is also called as data wrangling, is extremely, extremely important. I have always encouraged my teams to actually be the data first team and not the model first team. Because no matter how beautiful your model is on curated data, right, it's fairly useless when it starts seeing real data. So managing data and preparing that data and creating those pipelines to feed the data in a timely manner is more important than actually creating the model itself. In fact, I challenge my teams, I'll tell you one funny thing, I challenge my teams to actually build a random number generator. So I say to them that build a random number generator between 0.94 to 0.98 accuracy, treat that as a model, create an API around it, and focus on the data. Right? You can always go to Hugging Face or somewhere and find the right model, but solve the data problem first. Does that answer your question?
How ethical and unbiased is today's AI?
So just to answer your question, I think today's AI is extremely ethical and extremely unbiased. But the fear is what's going to happen in the future. Because the way the technology is moving from where we are today, the technology is just taking off, correct? So except things like ChatGPT or the big models with say 10 billion parameters, there is no chance for the model to actually step out and become unethical because it's not available in the open to get the bias. But I think you are familiar with the Microsoft model that was deployed and it became completely unethical when it was exposed to open internet. So I think some of these problems we have to solve more in a futuristic way and put in those checks and bounds to make sure the biases are gone away. And to your point, right, I think she left, but I think to the data point, the biases actually come out of data, right? And I think I can tell you one interesting story about the Second World War. So in the Second World War, here is what happened. So from London, when the planes used to leave to bomb Germany, they used to return back with bullet holes in them under the wings, right? So what they used to do was they used to patch those bullet holes with steel plates and send those planes back. And they used to get bullet holes in the similar place. But the number of casualties did not decrease. So what they did was they hired a scientist from America. He went and studied the airplanes. What he said was, you guys are doing it completely wrong. You need to patch the airplane where there are no bullet holes. So they started patching the bullet holes, not patching the bullet holes, but providing additional armor to where there were no bullet holes. And everybody thought he was crazy. But the number of casualties suddenly dropped down. Do you know why? Because their data was completely biased. The airplanes that got shot never returned back. They got shot and they fell in Germany. So they never had the data on which was the critical hit point. So that's a very I thought this is a very interesting story about the data bias.
Sudhir, I appreciate your session. It was really inspiring. And I'm sure that young minds here have got inspired. but can you give them some quick bullet points as to, everybody cannot be a Sudhir Kulkarni. But what can they do, or what is the major agenda they should follow after getting inspired right from now, what they can start doing in order to follow your path?
Thank you. I think that's a good question. So in other words, you're asking me to summarize my presentation. So, so if I had to actually summarize my presentation, remember what I have said, right? The first thing I have said is communication. Focus on communication. Communication is extremely, extremely important. Focus on English communication. That's very, very important, right? Second thing is find one of these areas. I think there was a question about this. Find one of these areas that I have mentioned that you are passionate about and hot, and start focusing on them. So first thing I have talked about is communication. Second thing I have talked about is focus and soft skills. I think those would be my 3 bullet points. And the fourth one is, take risks. Health is wealth. This is a good point. Yes, this is a good point. I think that's all the questions we have. I want to thank all of you for giving me this opportunity and coming to this talk. And I want to thank the college administration for giving me this opportunity as well. Let's keep in touch. I am available on LinkedIn. Send me a LinkedIn invite. You've already taken the first step to come to this talk. I encourage you to take the next steps as well. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Sudhir Kulkarni for his inspiring, insightful, thoughtful, motivating story. I am damn sure all our younger minds are very much inspired by your story, sir. Thank you so much for being with us. I now request Professor S.P. Deshpande, Dean Student Affairs, to present a token of gratitude to Mr. Sudhir Kulkarni. Thank you so much, sir. No duty is more urgent than that of returning the thanks. I now request Mr. Vinay Shetty, member IIC KLSGIT, to propose vote of thanks.
A warm and graceful afternoon to everyone gathered here. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks and acknowledge the contribution of those who worked really hard to make this session happen. I extend a heart vote of thanks to our speaker, Mr. Sudhir Kulkarni, GM Intel Corporation, USA, who spared his time from his busiest schedule to grace this occasion. Today we had an opportunity to hear your thoughts, and this will surely be going to encourage us in our future. Your thoughts have enlightened our minds and have shown us a new path. My gratitude for you for gracing the occasion and sharing the opinions today. A special mention to our respected KLS management, Principal Dr. Jayant Kittur sir, Dean Students Affairs, Professor S.P. Deshpande sir, Dean MBA, Professor D.A. Kulkarni sir, President IIC, Dr. Kiran Tangod sir, Dr. Manjula Ramannavar, Convener IIC, Mr. Vinay C. Kulkarni, Associate Member, Insurance Institute of India, for being the catalyst that stimulated us to do our best and standing as a pillars of strength. With a deep sense of appreciation, we thank our teachers, invitees, and audience for their untiring efforts. I would also like to thank the people who worked behind the scene to make this event happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of KLSGIT, I thank everyone for being here today for this wonderful session on My Story by Mr. Sudhir Kulkarni. May I now request all the dignitaries who have arrived here to come on the dais for a photograph session. I request the teachers who are present also to join us. I request the faculty members also to join.
Shivani,